O'clock, we're gonna get started. Nick is stuck in traffic. I don't know about Carolyn. We have three, so we can make it. So we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is to my left. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just as a reminder to everyone, the meeting is being recorded by local media. So I'm going to rearrange this a little bit because we don't have enough to vote on the minutes because we weren't here. So we could vote, actually we can't, so we're gonna skip that. So we'll move to the warrants.
You're willing to vote? For the town meeting?
The town meeting night.
So we have two of the four, right?
We have we have
Who was he? Who was
two
he?
of the four and one
I
of
wasn't here for the last two.
Both Dan and Sherry were not there
So
for
it's not
the
enough
town
to
meeting
carry.
night.
Two was not enough for a quorum on four, no? Okay.
All right, so warrants information, school expense warrant, October 13th, $2,774,148.04. October 19th, $948,361.98. School payroll warrant, $1,095,344.77. Wish to enter these into the public record. Next item is the student representative updates with Malia and Antonio.
Hey guys, so this week we basically just asked the principals to tell us about any Halloween activities or lessons that they're doing or anything that the kids are looking forward to. Principal Higgins said that the LGN students are looking forward to the trunk or treat on Friday night, sponsored by the parent organizations of the Yale, JCS, and LGN. They're also very excited for the parade on Sunday and dressing up on Halloween for a parade around school.
And then from the Yale, we have Yale has the Hey PTO Trunk or Treat event on Friday night, starting at 6 p.m. outside the Yale with the JCS and LGN parent boards. Our PTS has done such a spectacular job setting up this event for all our elementary school students. On Monday, October 31st, students are allowed to come in with their costumes if they want, and all teachers and staff will be dressed in a themed complete against each other for the best costumed hallway. Students will be celebrating in their homeroom classes with different activities, movies, and games. Should be ghoulish fun for all of us as we celebrate the season and get into the spirit of things.
So for the middle school, they're doing their school dress-up and costume contest on Friday, and also on Friday night from 6 to 8, they're having their annual tradition of the Halloween activity night and dance from 6 to 8 at the middle school, and it'll be the first time since 2019, so before COVID, since they've been able to have the event, and Mr. Dalton said that the excitement is definitely palpable.
And then from the high school, the class of 2024 is sponsoring an outdoor Halloween movie, Nightmare Before Christmas, which is tonight. The Cube Club continues to put together chilling portraits of Halloween characters. Right now, Jack Skellington is on display in the front foyer. The Student Council is sponsoring a student costume contest with prizes for the funniest, scariest, and best duo costume. The most anticipated contest, however, is the teacher costume contest. Departments determine themes, and all teachers in the departments dress as part of the theme. The English department has won several years in a row with costume themes like giant babies, Mario Kart costumes, and the Grammar Police. We will see if they can defend their crown.
And I think that is it, so happy early Halloween to everybody.
Great, thanks guys. All right, so go back to the minutes now that we have the rest of the committee here. So entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the October 13th meeting.
So,
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
4 and 1 abstains. So entertain a motion to approve the October 17th open session meeting minutes.
so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
3, 2 abstain. Okay, next up is opening of school remarks with Principal Dolman. You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, so happy to report the high school has been opened very successfully this year, a lot of positivity. This year we welcomed 687 students, 184 of them are ninth graders, so we have a pretty big ninth grade class. We actually welcomed a lot of new staff, so 9 new teachers, George Argeru in the SPED department, Kathleen Castro in the SPED department, Gabby Doolin in the SPED department, Allison Gingras in the SPED department, Megan Haskell also in the SPED department. We welcomed a new music teacher, Michael Connorth, a new science teacher, Hannah Norwood, a new Spanish teacher, Bobby Portway. We welcomed 2 new guidance counselors, Michaela Soroyce and Julia Tavares. We welcomed a new industrial arts teacher, David Cuddington, and a new math teacher, Juliana Soul. We also welcomed a new paraprofessional, Brooke Panic, a new nurse who came from the Hay, Maggie Miller, and a new custodian, Andrew Lezot, started earlier this year. So obviously the school, one thing we've endured a lot of construction going on outside, obviously the solar awnings, the fields. The students have been really great at taking that in stride, particularly the sports teams. We're all looking forward to them being done. We think probably sometime middle of this month, everything should be kind of cleared up. We've had really successful sports seasons, despite the fact that some of their facilities were disrupted. Our boys soccer team is currently 7-7-1, which is good for 12th in Division III. Girls soccer 7-3-6, which is good for 16th in Division III. Volleyball is this TVL Small Champions at 14-3, the first time since 1998, actually, in 5th place in Division III. Football is still looking for the first win of the season. They're going to play a sort of home game at Taunton this week. We look forward to that. Boys cross country had a 5-0 season. They were TVL Small Champions. Girls cross country was 4-1. Golf was 4-12. Cheer competed in 3 big meets so far. The Franklin Invitational, which they finished first, second at the Milford Invitational. And Ms. Burkett asked me not to mention this, but I will. In a highly competitive Bill Rickham meet, they placed 5th. They're looking forward to the TVL Championships this weekend. One thing that's been going on at the school, much like the rest of the schools in the district, we've really been focused on our integrated multi-tiered system of support, where we've been really delving into student data. We've kind of resurrected a structure that had been here previously, which was our professional learning communities, PLCs. So they're meeting every single day. Some teachers meet at the end of the day in order to look at student data, make intervention plans for students, and move forward that way. We've also seen a lot of success from our project-based learning initiative. We had a big cohort of teachers do some professional development at the end of last year. They've already started implementing those projects. We've seen a lot of enthusiasm from the students, in part because of those projects. Some of our 9th graders have been really looking at school improvement, community improvement plans, and it's just been a very positive beginning to the school year so far, from my perspective. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Next.
Fields are looking good, though.
Yes. Next is the Sarah's Village presentation with Mr. and Mrs. Bresnan.
Keep going.
Yep, you go.
Oh, no, it's different tab.
Let's
Sorry.
see.
About.
Yeah.
It goes
Going.
a ways down, yeah.
No problem.
Noticed a couple teachers on our board. Lisa Daly and Tanya Benoit.
There we go.
There we go. So I just wanted to take a few minutes just to recognize Mark and Cynthia for all the work they do for us in our community. I'm going to let them tell their story, but I really, when you hear their story, you're going to know why we really wanted to have them come out and speak to you tonight. When I started in Norton, I felt myself really enjoying and feeling lucky about having lots of community support, especially around our students' mental health. And they are a shining example of the kind of support that we get from the community. And I can't thank you enough for all you've done for our kids and our families. So, and I'll let you tell your story.
Awesome, thanks.
So I'm Cynthia Bresnan, and this is Mark. Together with our son, Thomas, we founded Sarah's Village. Some of you know me. I've been a teacher for 35 years. I taught 15 years in Plymouth and then 20 years in Norton, 10 years at the Yale and then 10 years at the middle school. But then I retired in 2020. And then, yeah. My husband's a safety consultant, was a safety consultant for Liberty Mutual. He also retired in 2020. He beat me by a few months. But, and then our son is 28. He's a graduated biology major, and he's working at a biotech firm. He's engaged to be married in September to Molly, who's our director of communication. But in honor of our Sarah, we founded Sarah's Village, and our mission, as we call it, our perfect mission, is to promote wellness, eliminate the stigma, and reduce the amount of suicide. I do not like public speaking, despite being a teacher. He does a great job, so I'm handing the baton over to him.
Oh, thanks. So just back up a little bit on our journey. It was 2016, June of 2016. Thomas was graduating from Northeastern. Sarah was graduating from Oliver Ames, and we were pretty much, Thomas had a job and he was gonna move out and live in Somerville. And Sarah was on her way to UMass Amherst. where she was in the Eisenberg School of Business and Honors College. So everything was going great, and first semester, 4 A's, A-, feeling good about the people she's meeting, integrating in the college. And then in April 6, 2017, she succumbed to a mental illness we didn't realize she had, and she took her life. So certainly a challenging time for us. And at that point, she left us a note, and not about 30% of the people that take their life leave a note. And in her note, she said, "I know I can get help, but I choose not to because I don't want people to look at me differently for the rest of my life." So that's really the basis for the eliminating the stigma. And it is the second leading cause of death for people 13 to 24. So it's out there, we realize it. And so what we're trying to do is take something tragic like the death of Sarah and try to create some magic in the communities. We lived in Easton for 27 years, and obviously Cynthia being integrated into the Norton community. So we did a lot of work with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. We raised about $110,000 for them over 5 walks. We just completed our 6th this year. But we wanted to create a foundation where we could control that cash a little bit more and put it directly into the community. So we started our foundation last year, and got 501c approved and all that good stuff. And so we started taking that money and putting it back in. So we've been partnering with Vinny and Dr. Baeta about, how can we make a difference, where was the greatest need. So last year we partnered with Epione and did this Reduce Stress, Increase Success program here at the high school, along with a presentation that Dr. Booth did for parents. So the next opportunity, when we were talking about, we realized that our funding should really be school year based, and so we hung out in April of this year, and we said, okay, what can we do? And we were tossing a bunch of ideas around, and Vinny and his schedule had to go, and the time ended. He's like, if I had one thing that you could do, it would be to they're losing the funding for the counseling program, and so could we come up with that? And that was about a $16,000 program. So at the time we did not have the cash, but we knew that we could raise the cash. So we said, we actually talked about it a couple days, and we said, all right, we'll take over the program. So we pledged $20,000 to Norton for this school year, and it's a combination of the counseling program, and then the Reduce Stress, Increase Success program is now at the middle school. So our board member and adjustment counselor Lisa Daly is working together with Epione to try to see if we can have a little bit more engagement at the middle school level. And then we've also made a grant to Easton for $20,000. So that's where we're trying to take that tragedy and take the tragic and try to create a little magic in the communities that mean so much to us. So that's kind of our story. So.
And I want to just stress the program that we're talking about is working with Epione. So we should also give some credit to, because they do it at a very reduced rate, as low as it can go. And we were able to provide up to 10 weeks of counseling to students and families that either can't access the counseling right away for various reasons, or have insurance issues, or in some cases don't have mental health insurance. And as you know, right now the wait list, even if you do have insurance, can be very long depending on that insurance. So with their help, they're able to, Epione's able to do that at the rate that they are. And then they do the 10 weeks, and oftentimes they either work to get them, cleared through insurance, or they find them during that time another place to go. But especially for families and students that need that help right away, it's literally a phone call away. A guidance counselor, adjustment counselor calls me. We do a referral, and usually they're seen within a week or so at most. So originally that was done through some of the funding we got during the pandemic, but as you know, some of that has dried up for that, and it's like, boy, this has just been literally a lifesaver for some kids and families, and so they jumped right in, and so that has been a huge success for us. Our counselors and our families talk about it all the time. So again, without your support, I don't think that would exist right now for And we are referring families there almost every week, so I do appreciate that. We all appreciate it. I know counselors talk about it all the time, so thank you again.
Well, Norton was there for us when we really needed it, so we're glad to give back.
Yeah, and that's really how we came up with Sarah's Village. It took a village to raise Sarah, and it's taken a village to help us adapt to life without her. So, and then I think the village is helping to spread the word as well, and being kind and helping others, and maybe being a little more understanding. What was cool about the program too is we speak with Nicole from time to time, and we pay them directly, and I'm very data driven. So I'm like, all right, Nicole, how many kids? Because we thought it would be like 12 to 16 kids. And we're like, how many did you help last year? And she's like, oh, I have that data. And she looks up, and she goes, wow, 40 kids. I'm like, all right. So it's that. It might be some just to get that, oh, it's 5 weeks before we can, see someone, but they create that capacity to allow someone to get in, and 1 or 2 sessions might only come against the grant, but it's that access to get the help they need when they really need it. And our latest newsletter was just a tremendous story about a student who got that immediate access and has felt great and has those coping capabilities, and is back to being their best self, and is now really a spokesperson to try to get other students to get the help they need.
And a number of those students have been part of starting the Active Minds chapter that we're going to, it has actually launched in the last week or so here at the high school. So, definitely had that kind of trickle down effect, and they're addressing just what you want, which is, the stigma.
Yep. Great organization, Active
So,
Minds.
I just had just a question. Sure. What type of fundraising activities do you guys do? Do you have like an annual fundraiser? Like, I'm just thinking like if we can share that, like folks can, go to the website, donate, or if you have like events that people can take part in, or just, where's that funding stream coming from? And we do 100% appreciate it, but I just hope folks could listen to the message, read the message, and donate for the cause.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, Dan. So right now, the one event we have been doing was the walk, and then instead of donating to the walk would be to donate through our website. So while our son is a biology major, he is also minoring in web design right now. So he was able to connect. So we do just have the donate button on our website, and then that goes directly through DonorBox, Stripe, and then into our account. So we just try to make that plea to people to donate through the website, so then that way we can put our energy and efforts towards trying to do programming and things like that.
And I believe I was not able to make it, but I know there was some staff that attended the walk as well, right? Yeah, staff show up.
Yeah, the Teachers Association. And so we had 80 people on our team this year, about 500 people at the walk. So we've sustained participation and energy around the village, which we're extremely grateful for. A lot of people trying to make a difference. I was at Borderland State Park.
Okay.
So I just want to first, I hope I can get through this, say how sorry I am for the loss of your daughter.
Thank you.
I can't imagine how difficult that is. But thank you
You're
for
welcome.
what you do.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
I can see more. I can't right now. You make a huge difference to kids and families. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your opportunity.
Thank you.
Very much.
Take care.
All right, so our next item is the MCAS overview with Dr. O'Neill.
Sorry guys, I need to paint tonight.
All right, we're going to take a 5-minute recess just after that moving presentation. So we're just going to take a 5-minute quick break, please. Dr. O'Neill, please take us through our fine MCAS results.
Thank you all very much for having me here tonight. to present the 2022 MCAS results for Norton. As some of us may recall, this was actually the first full administration of MCAS since the spring of 2019. During the spring of 2020, there was no assessment, and then last year in 2021, students in grades 3 to 8 only took half of the test, and it was only our 10th graders that took the full assessment because of the graduation requirements. So a lot of the data that we received this year in terms of accountability is not as comprehensive as years past. The last comparison we really have is from 2019, before our students missed all of that school time. There's really no information that allows us to kind of set targets for the upcoming school year. And there's really very limited information in terms of progress and growth for our students as well, because we really did have a few years without data. So the way that the state is kind of looking at this assessment is that it is a new opportunity for us to establish baselines for academics, and there is definitely the opportunity for us to grow and for us to go up. So some of the trends and patterns that we're seeing across the state were very mixed in comparison to 2021. We saw students in some grade levels that had some increases in math scores, but a more significant decline when it came to English language arts at all grade levels. We certainly have a lot of work to do in order to help our students recover from the learning loss that took place during the pandemic, and we are certainly prepared to do that work. One of the things that was really interesting was students' grit when it came to writing. We found that a lot of students did not necessarily complete the long composition or the writing questions. And when they did do that, they only achieved very minimal points over and above the 7 points that were on the table for them. So that was something that was not just a Norton issue, it was something that was seen across the state. But when we were able to look at our own data, we were really surprised to see how many students did not attempt those writing passages.
So were they optional, or was it
They're
a
not.
time thing?
They're
or
not
just-
optional. I think it was one of those situations where oftentimes students will complete the assessment and do the questions that they're able to answer a little bit easier. It's all online. The typing, I think, is a challenge sometimes for students as well. And then when in cases where they did write, they just didn't put a lot of detail or really show the stamina needed to get a high score in that area. And then I'm also going to talk a little bit about student absenteeism and the missed learning days that we had throughout the course of the year. And the numbers for that, even just here in Norton, are really significant. So in Massachusetts last year, the average student missed 15 days of school, and that's in general. A student is considered chronically absent when they miss 10% or more, and that is 18 school days. In Norton, we had 17% of our students, or almost 400 students, that were considered chronically absent last year, which means they missed at least 18 days of school. And that 17% of students fell in the range of 10 to 20 days missed. And I think it's really important for us to have a continued conversation about student absenteeism. If you're not here in school, it's really hard for us to meet the needs of our students and to help them on that path of learning. We also had a significant challenge when it came to staff and the days of school that they missed. The COVID protocols really were still so strict last year that required 5 days of quarantine or isolation. And we know, if we learned anything from this pandemic, we know how important it is to have our highly qualified teachers in the classroom with our students. And when we are having all these challenges with staff illness, with student illness, it makes it really, really difficult for us to continue to make progress, because it's continuing to perpetuate that gap of students and teachers not together in school. So that is something that we are having long conversations about as a team in terms of how can we get our students to school and how can we work with our parents and our families to get them here.
John, how does the 17% that we have compare to the state as a whole?
It's definitely on the lower end.
17% is lower than most people?
Yes. The average student, I think it was and I apologize because I don't have this directly in front of me, so I'm going off my memory. I believe it was 25% of students across the state were considered chronically absent last year. So we're under that average in that case.
And sorry, you're not going to have this, but if we were looking at just what we would consider like a cohort school, because I'm thinking that inner city schools are probably higher. Someone like Easton is probably a lot lower.
And I think,
It was just an article published that was like you referenced it at one of the last meetings, like 1 million days of school.
and that was
in
just, those were
Massachusetts.
just COVID-related days. 1.7 million days were missed this year by students because of COVID-related illnesses. And that does not include staff absences. This does not include other absences. One of the things I've actually been doing this week is I've been at JCS every morning meeting with the grade level PLCs. And we were having conversations about student attendance and how even now we're seeing that students are missing a significant amount of days. And today was only the 37th day of school.
So that's what I was going to ask you. So this is last year's data.
This is last year's data. So
have we looked at this year's data and extrapolated forward and said,
thought-
okay, here's what we look like right now?
Didn't you have something at our October meeting, we were talking about chronic absenteeism, because it was something, and we were
Yeah.
pretty high already, right?
Yeah, we have a lot of students who, we were putting it in terms of the policy that we were suggesting as
Yeah.
far as 5 per
Like
quarter, but that's the
grade.
10% that we're talking about. Yeah, we had, I couldn't pull it off the top of my head, but yeah, we have a significant number of students already at that 5 absence threshold.
Would it be in the 17% range? Or?
Probably, as of the last time we looked at that data, or I looked at that data in our October meeting, I think it was around a little more than 10%, but that was 2 weeks ago, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is possible that this is something that's going to self-correct as we get farther and farther in.
let's hope.
What are the protocols now for it? Like, do people still have to quarantine for 5 days?
I believe so.
So, I mean,
If,
that
if,
right
if you're,
there-
if you're not vaccinated.
No, that's not the case anymore.
So if you're not vaccinated, but if you, am I wrong, Nick? If you're vaccinated, you can still come,
There's
as
no-
long as you're not.
No, the state did away with any vaccine, non-vaccine,
Right.
you can go. The only holdup now is if you get COVID, you have to be out 5 days.
Right, so
Thank
kids
you.
who
So
may
no
have
more
been sick
exposure.
with COVID are out right
Yeah.
off the bat 5 days, and we're already at October, whatever. So that could be a lot of what's going on there.
That includes weekend days, and then it's 5 days of masking afterwards. But,
Yes.
right. Yeah, it is.
So as of today, and I was just able to pull this data up through Panorama, which is our student data system that we use for looking at academic, social, emotional, behavioral attendance data. 82% of our students are considered on track in terms of attendance. So it's still about 18% that we're concerned about at this point in the year in terms of attendance. So that's something that we're really looking at the building level. What is our process for reaching out to families and talking about the importance of being in school?
Yeah.
Especially for our youngest learners, the
And
parents
this
need
doesn't-
to help us get them here.
It doesn't include like chronic tardiness, right? I mean, because I'm sure that's a large population, but they're not even included.
They're not, these are absences. So here we go. This is our new baseline for students that were considered exceeding or meeting the expectation for the 2022 spring administration. You can see there's a couple purple circles on there. Math in grades 3, 6, and 8 were actually slight increases over the 2021 data. In grade 3 math, that was actually an 11-point increase, which was our largest increase from last year to this year. And then in grade 8 ELA, we also had a small increase there. That was a 3-point increase. Other than that, we were very, very much the same, or we saw declines in our student data.
So in two of these baselines, we have a majority of our students meeting or exceeding. Otherwise, the majority of our students are,
Not even, I would,
Below that.
yes, I would say 10th grade,
right, 10th grade ELA,
ELA.
10th grade science.
10th grade
Otherwise-
science.
And you know my feelings on the 10th grade test, they dumb it down, so.
I'm going to show you some more 10th grade data so we can have a bigger conversation about the graduation requirements. So I think, as you know, we all can see, there is a lot of work for us to do here. I think it's really important for us to reiterate that we really believe in the importance of SEL for all of our students, and that has to include having high expectations for their learning as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about a few things that we've already started working on, and happy to answer any questions as well.
What was the circles for again? Sorry.
Thanks, Nick. The circles show the areas where we saw an increase from the 21 administration. So last year, the third grade math scores were 11 points lower. So we are starting to see a few areas with those increases. There is definitely still a long way to go, though.
So I'm going to just jump in
Please.
here because
Yes.
you know what I always say about this. Problem is, so in third grade math, we saw an increase, but it's different kids.
Correct.
This is not cohort data.
It doesn't tell us what we think we're being told.
I know the state's probably giving us new baseline. What's our old baseline, and what does that look like compared to this? Because the ages of the kids don't change.
Yep, so
Just the grade.
in 2019, sorry, I've got like papers here everywhere. 2019, third grade was 52 for ELA and 42 for math, so math's kind of the same. 37 for ELA and, sorry,
Fourth grade?
hold on. Yeah, 37 for ELA and 38 for math in fourth grade. So the ELA definitely took a big hit there. Math's about the same. 57 for ELA in grade 5. That took a big hit. 49 for math again. 55 in grade 6 for ELA. 50 in math for grade 6. 7th grade, 52 for ELA. That was a big jump. And then 51 for math in grade 7. I think that's probably the area where we saw the biggest drop.
What was it, what year was this, Jen?
2019, it was the
So
last
before,
administration,
right,
yeah. So, and then, I'm sorry, 8th grade was 56 for ELA and 42 for math, and then 63 for 10th grade ELA and 66 for math. So there are a few things that are hovering in the same area as before, but there's definitely been a large decline in terms of the students that we're considering exceeding or meeting expectations. So it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's really hard to kind of compare that data because they're going to be giving us all new baseline and benchmarks to work towards. So it's, we need to make sure that we are almost creating our own benchmarks for success and making sure that we're, as I said earlier, having really high expectations for our students and making sure that they have access to grade level materials. Earlier this summer, our district admin team spent 3 days at Wheaton College, and we did a 3-day really immersive training with the University of Missouri around integrated multi-tiered systems of supports. And what that is taking a look at students, not just from an academic lens, but also from a social, emotional, behavioral wellness lens, and looking at what are the universal screeners we have for all students, how are we assessing our students in terms of both academics and SEL, and then once we have this data on our students, how are we organizing our instruction in terms of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, to make sure that we're providing the appropriate supports, regardless if it's academic or social emotional. Last year, we did a full K-12 math review in partnership with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education that really focused on high quality instructional materials. Our K-5 math teachers are actually at this time engaged in a field test where we're trying out a couple different programs, and we'll be making a recommendation to the committee in the spring about a new math resource that really is research-based and considered to be a very high-quality curriculum product. We also were just accepted into the same instructional material network for English language arts, and we will be doing that starting in November as well. So we're really taking a look at what are the curriculum resources that our teachers have. We've had a lot of staff turnover these last few years as well, so we want to make sure that whether you are a veteran staff member with 20 years of teaching under your belt, or you're a brand new teacher in your first year, that we're providing you with the same resources and materials to be successful in your classroom. We've also made a commitment to universal design for learning in terms of our professional development for this year. And really what that means is how do we design our instruction so that we have the same goals for all of our students, but helping them to get there in a way that's appropriate for them. So firm goals, flexible means, and really designing lessons so all students can access them, regardless of what their ability level is at that time. So we talked about grade 10, and when you look at the data here, it shows you that 9% of our students were exceeding expectations and 57 were meeting. So the data I showed you previously took those two categories and added them together. The funny thing about the graduation requirement, though, is that the 472 score that you need to obtain in order to graduate is in the middle of that partially meeting expectations category. So you can't look at it and get a really good picture of what that means. So of our 160 students that were tested, took the regular assessment, not an alternate, 154 of them achieved that passing score. So we have 6 students that we will need to be working with at the high school in ELA in order to help them graduate. And what is required from the state in that case is we put together the guidance counselor, the principals, the student, they put together an educational plan for that student to, number one, look at ways that we can increase their proficiency, find ways that they can retake the MCAS test over their next few years while enrolled at Norton High School, and also see what type of interventions we can provide to them both during the school day and before or after school as well.
So do we have any data on, these 6 kids that didn't do well on MCAS, how they do in school?
Yes.
Like in actual classes?
Yep, we can cross-reference this.
So that I would love to know.
Yeah.
Like how does it look for this test, and how does it look for them in the classroom?
I would say most often the data is pretty well aligned. That the students that struggle with the assessment typically need maybe additional supports when it comes to mastering some of their content. So what we've found, in that it can be a challenge for us when we're developing these educational plans, and Mr. Dahlman's still here and he's got a lot of experience with that as well, is that it's often the kids that can't miss something else for us to pull them for an intervention and for us to design something for them, which makes it really, really difficult to offer some of those supports.
Because that was my next question. How do we get to 10th grade and just realize this? You know what I mean? That was my next question.
Yeah.
If they're aligned with the class having struggles in an MCAS test, how are we at 10th grade realizing this?
And I think it depends on the individual student.
Yeah.
So looking at, I couldn't tell you, off the top of my head, just, what particular thoughts I have in terms of those 6. But it could be a student that, struggles significantly, maybe has different accommodations as well. Sometimes we have kids that just don't test well.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have kids that aren't really interested in taking the assessment and kind of go through.
That's why I'm wondering how
But
it
I would say
relates.
that nine times out of 10, we get them across that finish line. We get them to the point where they're able to pass. And to me, 6, I thought, was actually a better number than it was last year. What do you think?
So,
I'm not worried
Yeah.
about the number 6.
Yeah.
It's more of, I wonder what the correlation is between the class and this MCAS test. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah. I would say, most times the students are having difficulty in the classroom as well. Not always.
so is this our current 10th graders or our current 11th
This
graders?
is
that
our
tested
current
last?
11th graders. They tested last year. It's the class of 24.
Okay. So if graduation was tomorrow, we'd have 6 kids not walking potentially based on this assessment.
Yes. But because they're still 11th graders, we have.
No,
time
yeah, I
to
get
them
that
there.
part of it. I don't have a flavor for something like this as a graduation requirement, to be honest with you.
I don't disagree, and you know, as people will say, colleges don't ask students what their MCAS scores were. But unfortunately,
They didn't even ask for SATs.
SATs, right?
Exactly.
But you know, unfortunately, this is the requirement that we are faced with here in Massachusetts. And we
this
work
was
really
just
hard with the
newly
students.
thrust upon us, right, in the last year or so, like they just made this, DESI made this change, right?
So
For the
so
most part.
ultimately, they changed the requirement. So as you may recall, we used to have the original, they called it the legacy assessment, and it was advanced, proficient, needs improvement, and then at the high school level, it was failing. And there was, you know, 4 requirements. The scores were very different than what they are now. And the change that they made, in which I believe we all wrote a statement to the department, we talked about all of the work that goes into the educational plans that we have to develop for individual students, how it really is, it's not that we don't want to support students, we absolutely do, but it's a lot of hoop jumping for us to get through. They changed the qualifying scores, so yes.
So I guess that's kind of something, I know we talk about this every year, but if they just keep changing it, I mean, what are we doing here?
And I think unfortunately, coming out of the last few years that we've had, it makes it even more challenging because I shared the rest of our data with you, and we have a lot of work to do. But it seems like it's a difficult time to kind of change that target when we're all kind of struggling to, you know, get kids back in school and feeling good about themselves. Yeah. So math is the same thing. We had 37 of our students that missed that 486. If you'll notice, 486 is a higher qualifying score than ELA, which to me actually seems backwards because of the fact that, you know, typically students have more of a challenge with math. And then
I'm just going to ask,
yeah,
it.
please.
I probably know the answer, but it's a silly question, but I'm going to ask it. I'm assuming students need to pass all 3 facets of this graduation.
Yes, they do.
That's good.
And then for science, we had 10 students that did not have a qualifying score. And the science is, some of our students take the biology assessment, some of our students take the intro to physics assessment. So those are varied. Some are 9th graders, some are 10th graders.
And there's no opt-out for this, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Parents are able to, there is no opt-out. If we want to be technical about it, the commissioner will say there is no opt-out option. Parents have decided that they believe that they can opt their children out. However, every time a parent opts their child out, it's actually a hit on the district because it's another student who didn't test. It takes our participation rate and moves it way down. And ultimately, the state turns to us and says, what are you doing? Or now you have to do all of these other things because of your data or because of your participation. So while parents, you know, obviously feel that they have the right to do so, it makes it more difficult for the district.
So in science, you said that we have 10 kids
Yes.
who, so we have 14 not meeting expectations.
But only 10 of them.
Only 10 of them, so we have 4 students who are not meeting expectations, and the state is saying, good enough.
Okay, so this is all of our students in the district. So it could be that they are attending a out-of-district placement, but they're still reported on our rosters. So I gave you the information about the students we have here in the building who are taking the regular assessment. I did not count any of our students that may be taking an alternate assessment because of their IEP, and I did not include any of the students that may be in out-of-district placement. So we had 156 students. That might be a little bit off because of that.
How off?
A couple kids. Not super off.
Let's be very clear.
Yeah.
There's a crime being committed here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's against the students or the citizens of Massachusetts paying for this test, but there is a crime being committed here. This is absolutely ridiculous. And I know I rail against the MCAS every year, but I don't understand what we're doing.
Exactly.
I really don't. forget partially meeting, now we're saying not meeting is good enough. That is insane. I don't understand what we're doing. I don't understand why we're taking this test anymore.
Why are we wasting our time with this? It's a waste of time. They'll just keep changing, they just keep lowering the bar
They
and
do,
doing what it,
they do,
this is
every time.
unbelievable.
They've done the test now for the 10th grade.
So
When do they start to be challenged? I mean, I get they need salaries, I understand that, everyone needs a job. But at what point do we start challenging them? This is enough.
Should have challenged them back in COVID. That's
Huh?
when we should have challenged them.
Well, I've been challenging them for,
Yeah,
I mean, how many years have we been on the school
we-
committee?
we-
Yes.
We didn't though.
But
The-
no,
the people,
but-
we sat back, we let it happen.
But not, well,
Shame on all of us.
MCAS has been going on for a long time, and we have been very public about how we felt about
Every
MCAS
year
for
we-
years.
I feel very
We
good
have
about
this
my position I've
conversation.
taken.
But at some point, school committees as a whole need to step up and go to this, and enough is enough for our children.
Exactly.
Enough is enough.
That's why I
And
asked
you
the
can't
question.
tell me that this didn't hurt our children. This hurt our children, and now we're seeing it.
Correct. But I think we're all against the MCAS in terms of graduation. I think all 5 of us is totally with that. My concern is we have 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade numbers that are down hugely from 19. Hugely.
Right.
So we can put the blame wherever we want, and I'm not saying it's on us and on Norton, but it is the taxpayers of this state that we have let our kids down.
Yeah.
So
End of story.
I'm gonna put an addendum to that, and Jen knows where I'm gonna go with this. Because I've always said in the past, this is a waste of time, it doesn't tell us what we really need to know. The one thing it does do is give you a snapshot in time. Though it's hard to know if I look at a number, if I look at just the 3rd grade, English, and I say, okay, we have 7% exceeding and 37 meeting, I don't know what that means per se. The one bogey I can measure it against is how we do against the state. We have traditionally been a better than state district, and not by a point or two, but by a decent number of points. I didn't look at science for this, but we have two grade and topic that we are ahead of the state, and not by a lot. 4 that were at the exact same as the state, and 8 that were lower than the state, and some significantly lower than the state.
Yes.
I've never seen numbers like this.
No.
Never.
No.
I mean, and the whole state went through COVID. The whole state had the exact same scenario that we did. These are bad numbers. There's no way around that. They're just not good
Absolutely,
numbers.
and you and I have had this conversation, and it's, I think,
For a decade, we've had this
we've
conversation.
had this conversation more times than I think any of us want to
Then you
admit.
lie. You can say
Right?
what you were gonna say.
And it's so funny, because 12 years ago, I would come and I would have this like really long presentation, and I would go over all sorts of nitty gritty, and I've learned over the years not to do that, number one. But I'm gonna be honest that it was hard to put this together, because I always love being in our classrooms and love seeing our students and our teachers interacting. And one of the most fun things that I've done over the last couple weeks is visiting all these math lessons to see these new programs in action. And I think that the data that we see here does not represent who we are as a district. It does not represent who we are as educators, and it does not represent who our students are as learners. And so, if this is what this data looks like, I'm really passionate about how can we change the narrative and show all the great things that are happening here in Norton. Because I don't believe that this represents who we are and what we can do.
See, I agree with you on that, and we've been saying that for a long time, and I think that to try to get information or statistics coming out of this is just near impossible, right? We have great educators, we have great students, we've always said that this test doesn't define either one of those groups, right? But how do we get other data for how our students are doing?
Yes.
Right, because I feel like we have this conversation every year at this meeting,
Yeah.
and then it goes away, and we're done.
Agreed.
Like, so what are we doing sitting in these seats if we're not pushing back and saying
And asking
more?
for more.
Yeah.
And so I think we've always been in agreement that this does not define who we are, and this does not show what we're able to do. I think the negative of that is it's still an assessment that we have to take. It's the public relations of this data is not great. And I also think that I don't want to find us in a position where the Department of Education is coming in and telling us, this is what you need to do. because that is going to be when the real
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause
difficult
last time we did
conversations
that, it went
happen.
real well.
Well, and you know, and there are other districts that are in that position, and it's not good for morale of the staff, it's not good for the students. We lose control over our classrooms and our teaching practices. And I certainly don't want to be there, and I know our staff doesn't want to be there.
So this is
So-
why we back down. We back down because we don't have anything else to do.
And
Because we
it's-
don't have anyone else to fight about this. We back down because they have us.
But
They
They
have
have
us.
us,
Yeah.
right? And that's exactly it. But, so as I mentioned earlier, we've spent a lot of time since the summer because we knew this data was coming and spent a lot of time with our team in terms of looking at our supports and our intervention plans and what does that process look like. And we have an IMTSS committee happening at every single school. We're looking at real-time student data every single day. And what Joe and I are going to do is we're going to bring you our updated student data. We are going to show you our beginning of the year data for all of our students from September. And then we're going to show you our November benchmark. And we're also going to walk you through what that intervention process looks like in each of our buildings, how are decisions made about what student supports are needed for individual children, and then what are our next steps in these processes. Vinny and I wrote a grant a couple weeks ago for $150,000 to see if we can find an SEL screener, because that's something we don't have. We are training all of our reading and math interventionists on Monday for how to give these progress monitoring assessments. So we are really rolling up our sleeves and digging in. We are putting together a district-wide data team. So they have, all of our buildings have data representatives on their IMTSS committees. We're bringing those reps into the district to, okay, let's make some decisions about what this looks like. How are we, using this data when we have it? As I mentioned, I was at JCS every morning this week. I'm going to all the PLCs and showing them how they can look at their student data. Let's have conversations about this attendance, about the academics. Who are the kiddos that we're concerned about? And we're having all those conversations at every grade level. And I know that we probably can't make, incremental growth or huge growth in 1 year, but we're working hard and we're working towards those goals as well, because this didn't feel good to me to show this to you. It doesn't feel good to me to,
Doesn't feel good to look at.
no, it doesn't. It doesn't feel, none of it feels good. But I know that Norton is more than this, and we'll continue to prove that to you.
The last thing I'm gonna say on this is the fourth grade continues to stick out as an outlier to the downside. At some point, we have to have a long and honest conversation about what's going on there.
Agreed.
I have not, in all my years of doing this, that I can recall, and I'm pretty sure I'm right, ever seen no kids at all in an exceed.
I think you are right. And I mean, I'd have to go back and look at my data, but I agree. I think that's been, so fourth grade, it does dip statewide from third to fourth grade. We've also always had the conversation about the transition. One of the things that I think has been a benefit over the last couple of years has been the fact that fourth grade teachers don't team anymore. They have their students with them all day long. And that typically is a benefit as well.
Can I just very quickly interrupt?
Yeah,
So,
please.
In ELA, third, fourth, and then fifth, the state goes 44, 38, 41. We go 44, 26, 41. This isn't the state BIPS issue.
No.
This is us. It's
So-
us. And we keep saying transition, we keep leaning on that crutch.
We do.
We gotta be honest about it. It is what it is, right? I know you said like these numbers don't say who we are. Sometimes they do, so.
Well, do we need to look at the third grade curriculum? I know we talk about transition, but there's a lot of districts where there's no transition. It's not a building transition from third to fourth grade. So I wonder if we need to start looking prior to fourth grade and look at that.
Oh, absolutely. So we always say, like, third grade MCAS scores don't belong to third grade. They belong to kindergarten, first,
Yeah.
second, and third. And the same thing with the fourth. We have to look at what are we doing to prepare students for those grade levels. Because it can't be the responsibility. If they're coming in with deficits, then we're going to continue to have deficits. But I would say, the K-12 math review that we did last year, I'm really excited about the changes that is going to bring to the curriculum. in K to 5, and then 6 to 8 is actually beginning their field test in January. So that should bring some change to the middle school as well. And we're going to be doing the exact same thing with literacy. So we are leaving no stone unturned, I guess.
So is there a way for you, like, come January and then come April, for you to update us?
Absolutely.
Right, I think that would be helpful, right? Just every few months or so to get the data,
Yeah.
to see how our students are doing.
Absolutely, we can do that. And then I know that Dr. Bayetta has sent the Vision 2026 to you as well. There are some really specific goals in there around third grade reading proficiency, as well as our integrated multi-tiered systems of supports and the implementation of that as well. So I believe we're going to bring that to our next meeting, so that will help us to move this work forward as well.
Yeah, because I think Vision 2026 needs to really be looked at in terms of what we're doing here. I think that's our 4-year out window type idea.
Yep.
It's not going to happen overnight, we get it,
Yep.
but I think that needs to be a very data-driven
Absolutely.
goals, not these lofty, this thing, that thing. Let's get some hard numbers back into the system here and start worrying about the 3 Rs and a little less about other crap, to say it nicely.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Nope.
All right, so the next agenda item is the second reading and vote on the cell phone and personal electronic device policy. So I know we've discussed this at length, at least 2 or 3 meetings now. Does anybody have any further discussion on this?
So I just want to be clear, what this new policy, because I wasn't here at the last meeting, this new policy, our students are allowed to keep their cell phones on them.
It's essentially silence and put it away.
Right, but it can be in a pocket, in a bag,
It can be on their person,
right,
minus teacher
right.
discretion.
So it's just like us. My phone is here, it's on silent, and that's how this is going to go. That's what this policy is. I'm reading this correctly, right?
I read it that it can't be sitting on your desk, it has to be.
It has to be
In your
off
pocket,
and
right,
away.
right,
So
right.
silent and away is
Right.
essentially what I would
Okay.
call the policy.
Okay.
Ms. Bukowski, you had something to say?
Yeah.
Sure, just.
So for those of you who don't know me, I think I know most of you, I'm Lauren Bukowski. I'm the academic coordinator for the science department. This is my 19th year of teaching. I also had all 3 of my kids come through the Norton school system and graduate from here. I no longer live in town. I moved to Plainville about 3 years ago, and this is so important to me that I got back in my car and drove back here tonight so that I could speak. Okay? I was one of the first teachers in the school, maybe 6 years ago, who started with putting the pockets on the wall and having the students put their phones there. And I am 100% in favor of having the phones off of their person. I know that people came and spoke at the last meeting, teachers came and spoke in favor of that, but I'd like to mention 2 points, some intangibles that I don't know if people are aware of. And I know part of it is my child doesn't use their phone. Why should they have to put it up just because other kids don't have self-control? When your phone is in your pocket or in your purse, it is still a mental stress to ignore it. If your phone is within reach, especially if it's on vibrate or if you know something's going on, it takes control to not, I mean, let's face it, how often are you somewhere and there's 2 minutes of downtime and that's your first, oh, well, I'll play around with this game or I'll kill this. It actually takes mental effort and focus away from the lesson to be constantly stopping yourself. The first couple of years that I did it, when I was one of the only teachers doing it, I made up surveys at the end of the year to see how the students felt about it. And a lot of them felt, I hated that. I like having my phone with me every single minute. but a lot of them did admit that, first of all, once they got used to doing it, it was just what you did. You put pants on before you leave the house, you put your phone in the pocket when you go into Mrs. B's class. The other thing is a lot of them said it actually took a little stress off. I wasn't worried about getting a buzz, I wasn't worried about what's going on. Even the good students, it's a mental distraction to have the phone with you. The second intangible is us. I am a much better, much calmer, more relaxed teacher when I don't have to worry about phones. When I'm not looking for them, when I'm not spotting them, when I'm having to look up and have to repeat a part of a lesson because somebody was distracted. The general feel in the class is better when they're not there. And there's a big difference. I also model this. I don't even bring the phone into the classroom with me. I leave my phone in my office all day. I do not have my phone out or with me ever when I'm in the classroom. So, you know, there's nothing, well, teachers get to have it and students don't. I don't have my phone out. I think all of us are reasonable about, today, can I text my mom? Sure. I finished my work. Can I check and see if work got in touch with me? I was supposed to work this afternoon. Absolutely. And I understand that if this isn't a school-wide, from what I understand, even if this doesn't become a school-wide policy, individual teachers will still have the discretion to enforce this policy in their classes. Is that correct? So there won't become any, well, you can't make me do that because it's not a school policy and Miss So-and-so doesn't make me do that. The huge added benefit is from when they leave the classroom, to go to the bathroom, to go and do whatever, not having their phone with them. At the very, very least, if you guys are going to vote that they are allowed to keep their phones on them, can we have the policy such that if they are outside the classroom during class time, they don't have it with them? They have to leave it in the class, because that is the cause of 90% of the issues in the high school. Students on their phone during class time out in the hallway. That's what stirs everything up. I've done this in my class for ages. I can show you my data from the surveys. I can show you my letter that I write to parents with my explanations and all the research for it. But I am begging you, please, don't. In the classroom, what other teachers do in their own classrooms shouldn't affect me. But the minute that other teachers are able to let students take their phones into the hallway, things get stirred up, and then it does affect everybody else in the school.
Thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Ms. Baker. Okay.
Dan, if I can just ask a question to your
Sure.
point, Mrs. Bukowski, if that is not written specifically in what we're reading, am I correct? So if we were to support that sort of as a compromise or something, you know, that even if we don't have them leave them at the door, but they are to be left in the classroom during class time if they were to go to the bathroom. That's not written in here, so I just want to make that clear that that's not what we have in our
No.
policy.
Ours is only for, ours does not mention the phone during a class period. You know, obviously, the absence of a policy and, you know, prior to Mrs. Bukowski's point, she does it. I mean, I know gym class does it. Those teachers can still go above this policy, but that's their discretion of their classroom, I would say. This is just more of the handbook policy that we've gone back and forth. This is the third meeting we've discussed it. This is a modification of the original one. The original proposed policy was away on the hanger. There was quite a bit of discussion on that, so this is, I don't know if this is, call it a midpoint. This, to me, is a start of something, but this is the off and away policy that was rewritten and is before us now.
Just a question. How is this different from what we do now in the majority of classrooms?
So this was very similar to the policy prior to this year. So the reason why we tried to enact a universal policy of students putting it in the hangar was essentially to support everybody doing the same thing, so that, as Ms. Mikowski alluded to, if another teacher allows students to have their phones, they could be using those to distract other students. And if everyone is doing the exact same thing, you lose some of that fear of missing out, some of the anxiety that comes about not knowing what's happening in the school. And really, it was done to support all of the teachers who wanted to have this policy in place.
So this policy is basically not changing anything we're currently doing, or last year doing, say.
Yeah,
We're putting more words on a piece of paper to make it look like a better policy, but it's really not changing anything.
So the big difference is it's up to us as administrators to enforce the handbook. So it would be like if we see a student with a phone out in the hallway, which we do occasionally do, we would ask that student, oh, what teacher are you coming from? And maybe they put a dummy phone in the holder. Maybe the teacher allowed them to have it. It would be a discussion that we could then have with the teacher. In this case, it's really just up to the teachers in order to do what they want. And it doesn't necessarily mean that if we see a student in the hallway with a phone, that might be because the teacher was allowing them to do that. That would be the biggest difference between those.
And then my point would be, I don't like the way this policy is written at all. I would go back to the first policy that we had that was written and putting the phones away in the holder, out of the kids' hands. And the reason for that is, I just looked at a bunch of data that our classrooms are completely failing. Let's take one more thing out of the classroom that we don't need.
All right, any further discussion on this policy? Okay, so at this point, is there a motion to approve the policy as it's written?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of this written policy?
Aye.
Aye.
Hold on. Okay.
I voted against it, that's a...
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
hold on a sec. Okay. I knew where you stood, Nick. All right, next item is the second reading and vote on regulation of school attendance.
And that is JEC, right?
JEC, that's correct. So what was this one?
We added the Norton High School District sponsor, was the
Okay.
the change.
All right, so any further discussion? And again, we've discussed this policy at length based on the first reading, adding in district-sponsored events or affiliated competitions, so on and so forth. Okay, any other questions, comments, discussion on this policy? Okay, entertain a motion to approve this policy as it's currently written.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Nick, yes?
Yep,
Aye,
it was a
sorry.
5.
Okay. I can't
I was
see you
reading
around.
that.
All right, thank you. All right, so the next is policy JH, student absences and excuses. I don't really like that title.
It's
but-
regulation of school attendance.
Okay, that's the title, all right. I see,
Yeah,
I'm
no.
like, is that a typo and it should say excused or, okay.
Yeah, I think that's technically a regulation of school attendance.
Okay. So this policy, again, has been discussed at length. We did get some clarifications on this. Okay, any further discussion, policy JH? Entertain a motion to approve the policy as written.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Yes. Second.
Aye.
Sorry, second.
I second.
Okay, sorry.
All opposed?
Opposed, Nick?
I'm sorry, I thought you said all.
Okay, let's
Four,
start.
4-1.
4-1?
Yeah, we're gonna forget the 17, we're gonna get
4-1?
4-1.
All right, so the next one is the second reading on the new signage policy. So this one, we haven't really had an open discussion because this was omitted from our last big meeting. So this.
It's still a second reading.
It's still the
We had
second
open
reading.
discussion at the
LG.
LGN,
Okay.
yes.
All right, so any further discussion on the signage policy as it's written?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Savas.
I would motion to strike the phrase "and approved student groups as set forth herein" from the policy.
And that is in line 2. As group set for.
Second paragraph?
Okay, is there a second to Mr. Savas's motion?
Can we just
And it
ask,
dies.
I'm sorry, just, can, can we just ask, I know we've talked about this, Dinesh, would you mind just kind of, once again,
I think it's,
sharing?
I think it's a backdoor to what we've been trying to avoid ever since Nick originally said we need to do this. And I think it opens us up to liability, including lawsuits.
I don't even know what to do.
That's $2 million question.
No second, so it'll revert back to the policy as it's written. So is there a motion to approve the signage policy?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
That was convincing.
Yeah.
Dinesh, opposed? 4-1.
4-1.
All right, next is the school handbook student attendance procedures. So this, we also went back for some clarification because we had a couple of different policies and this kind of meshed them into one. All right, any discussion on the student handbook attendance policy? No?
I just think to reiterate the point from last time was, I feel like we're just opening a can of worms from a standpoint of the,
The highlighted.
yes, the highlighted part of this, sorry, on the third page. That we're giving the pass-fail based on absences. I said it at our last meeting at the LGN too.
For what it's worth, I don't love it. I would vote to approve it as written, but I don't love that section either, to be honest with you. It's, I know it was explained last time, and I get why we're doing it. I know it's carrot versus stick type of thing, but I don't love it, but I guess I'm more comfortable than Nick is with it at this point, but.
So can I just ask a question, because I wasn't at the last meeting? So if a student has more than 5 unexcused absences, so if we're still looking at 5 days of quarantining for COVID, you're in trouble.
No, those
Well,
are
that
That
would
would
be
be
excused.
excused.
But that's excused if you have a doctor's note, correct?
No.
No,
100%.
Well, you have COVID, you have COVID out, right? I mean, it's-
Yes.
you're reporting it as COVID. If you're
But you
reporting
are
it as-
self-reporting. You're taking your own test
Yes.
and saying, yes, I have COVID. So I could have a cold,
Yes.
and
So the way that we change that is our school nurse has the ability, and also parents, to excuse short-term absences when it comes to illness, and for COVID, it would be our school nurse approving that 5-day.
but again, like a parent would be calling in and saying, you know,
Still
Johnny
the honor
has
system,
COVID.
It's correct. Yeah, you said it correct. It's on the honor system regardless.
Right.
But I think the big change was, you know, there was a little bit of ambiguity in this, but the excused versus unexcused and so on and so forth. So,
Yeah.
I think it was sort of the excused versus acknowledged,
Yeah,
and then,
yeah, that's what it was.
Originally,
My apologies.
originally, and then it was sort of
They
how
cleaned
they,
that up.
yeah,
That
I
got
thought,
cleaned up.
That was
I thought that
changed,
that
yeah.
was cleaned up very
Yeah.
nicely.
Okay.
It made more sense when I
Yes.
read it this
Yes.
time
Yeah.
than the first time.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
much more clear and
Right.
efficient, and
Yeah.
Okay.
I just was worried about those 5 days, but, yeah, I get it.
I think it made sense at our last meeting, sort of, the explanation of kind of the pass-fail made more sense in regards to really supporting, I think, students, and I think that,
Yeah.
given,
You can walk us through it again.
Yeah.
so.
Ethan, you want to walk us through it again?
I'll give you the recap, sure. So as far as the reason, last year's policy is if you had more than 5 unexcused absences, you would automatically fail unless you sent an appeal towards the Attendance Appeals Board, which was made up of administrators, guidance counselors, and the student was supposed to come with their parent. We ran into some equity issues with that as far as not having too much parent involvement and students who have a lot of unexcused absences. So this was sort of done really in part to be a little bit more proactive with it, is not having the Attendance Appeals Board, softening the penalty there and putting a lot more emphasis on reaching out to parents beforehand and trying to make attendance, basically along with our IMTSS focus here as well, is have a sort of attendance improvement plans. So those have already begun as far as our kind of attendance team. Our assistant principal, mostly Mrs. Benner, is reaching out to parents to try to set up plans in order to encourage better attendance. But we still, and we agonized over this quite a bit. We asked the faculty for their opinion on it as well, as far as that idea of an academic penalty for being absent. And we softened that from an automatic failure to if you had a grade that was passing, you would have a pass instead of that, and kept it if you had a failure, you would still have a failure. But the idea was basically to continue to have some type of academic penalty as opposed to no academic penalty. We don't have many behavioral interventions for absences. We can't suspend students when they're missing school. That is sort of counterintuitive. There's not a lot of additional things that we can implement, which is why we kept some type of academic penalty there.
How many students, it doesn't have an exact number, roughly were a part of that committee? The absentee committee, whatever it was?
The appeals board?
Yes.
So the way that
So
works.
just once, are you saying who went through it, or were the students representatives of it? Like what was the?
No, sorry. How many students
went
through
process?
it?
Okay.
Thank you.
So last year, as Dr. O'Neill sort of alluded to, we had a lot of problems with absenteeism, which is one of the reasons why we promoted this. The way that it worked last year is if you had 3 unexcused absences, you received a warning letter. So those were pretty high numbers. I just have the first 3 quarters from last year were 52, 92, and 51. Of those students who were there, 9 of them became attendance appeals eligible in quarter 1, 21 in quarter 2, and 15, meaning they surpassed 5 absences. So that's a total of 45. Many of those went through the attendance appeals process and were given some type of way to buy back attendance or allowed to sort of keep the, basically presenting reasons why they were absent and making plans for the future. And then we did implement the attendance failure in 17 instances out of those 45.
So on those data points, those were unexcused absences, not, so if a kid has COVID, they're not going to get a warning letter or something? Okay, I just want to clarify that.
So part of the attendance was we would have parents call in and just say, oh, my student's home sick today, I'm going to keep them out. That was by our old policy technically unexcused. If they did not provide a reason, they had to go through the nurse. The new policy allows parents without any documentation to have an excused absence by just saying my student's sick, up to 3 consecutive absences.
So of the 45 kids who came to the appeals process, 17 were failed due to attendance.
Well, 17 grades, yes.
17 grades.
So it
Got
could have been
So
one
they could
student.
have failed English but passed math. Got it. So, okay.
How does this equate to some of your opening remarks about the attendance right now with that high percentage of students having absences?
What do you mean equate?
So, because if we're looking at, if a student has more than 5 unexcused absences, and when you first started talking, we were talking about increased absences with the high school students. So are we already looking at possibly pass or fail?
There
for
are some students who would be, yeah, who have already been reached out to and are creating those plans, absolutely.
Yeah.
So don't get them conflated though, because the chronic absenteeism includes excused absences. So students who have more than 18 days in a year, those could be COVID related, just like you said. If you get COVID and you're out for a week, you're automatically, for 1 quarter, you're absent for that, chronically absent.
This is all so confused. Am I the only one that's super confused? I don't think my brain's working fully.
So one of the other,
It's a lot of numbers being thrown
It
around.
is.
one of the other big impetus for this is that we have a lot of students missing class or missing school
Yes.
for other reasons, things like vacations, things like
Yeah.
out-of-state sports tournaments and things like that, which are important and sometimes we want to support, but we also want to send the message that school is really important, they should be there. And that was why the acknowledged absence without documentation or medical excuse came in place, so that we could say that's a valid reason that you're giving us. It's not fitting to the definition of excused, but we acknowledge that you are going to be out.
I think that was one of the other changes too, was the makeup work was one of our big
Yeah.
concerns at
Yeah.
the first meeting. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, I get it if you have out-of-state things, I mean, or an out-of-state tournament on a Friday, it's a long weekend. I mean, I had kids that used to be in club soccer, the Friday before, you were dismissed at noon and you get your work, and I was the bad dad that before you start the tournament on Saturday, you do the work you missed on Friday. So I mean, it happens, I get it, but, I think your staff, from what you're saying, they're doing a good job keeping an eye out for these, kids that need to be, I don't wanna say held accountable, but they need to have some sort of, something held above them if they're not gonna get to school.
And I think the previous language was stronger in that we sort of this may or may not. I mean, again, the idea being is if it's an unexcused absence, like technically there's nothing that means that you have to be able to make up that work.
Yeah.
But most of our teachers, I would say,
Yeah.
all of the situations where that does occur, we do provide work for students to do it. But that's, we were kind of saying the quiet part out loud there in order to try to encourage people to think harder about those decisions.
Yep. Okay. Any other questions, comments on this policy?
Sure, I think just to kind of update you, my concern was you have the kid who's busting their butt in class every day, getting a 70 or a 69, getting that C minus D plus to pass. Kid next to him doesn't show up, unexcused absences all the time, and now just gets a pass fail. What is going to keep that kid who might be fighting to get that grade to go, no, what, why am I even showing up to school? I'll just get a pass fail.
The kid who's sitting next to him only gets the pass fail if he's actually
I
passed.
understand that, but what is a pass
So-
fail compared to a C minus?
Well, if you're that kid who's always out and you have B average, well, you just got yourself just a pass fail. You're losing that B average. So there's a little bit of a consequence, if I'm understanding correctly.
Correct, yeah.
So the kid who's going to class every day, and there's no upside or downside for him for this. Like, this is unfortunately, like, that's a whole other question that we do better by that kid as well.
Yeah.
But the kid who, I mean, if you're the kid sitting next to him and you also have a D, at this point, I mean, I don't know, maybe you just say the hell with it, or maybe you don't, whatever. But if you have some kind of a decent grade and you want to hang on to it and say, okay, I have a B and it's going to count for my GPA, it's going to make my GPA look better, then what are we using pass fail in the GPA, or are we pulling it out of the equation?
For quarter grades, it wouldn't count in GPA anyway, but just final grades.
Final grade,
Yeah.
all right? So
if
what
you
are we
get
doing?
past a final grade, it would not count in GPA.
So it comes out of the equation altogether.
So those are two different things. Just that's in a case where there was like some significant documented issue, student has missed, 45 days or something like that because of a hospitalization or something along those lines. We have alternative grades built in so that they could get a pass in particular classes. But that would not be the case for this. This is only quarter grades for attendance here.
So the final grade, this does not affect the final grade.
No. The 65 would count as your like 4 terms. So like if you did this for quarter one, but then you got into school all the rest of the times and you earned your typical grades, that would be a 65 that would count for your quarter average. So it'd be 25% of your grade would be the 65.
And I think we can kind of call it what it is at this point, the
Yeah,
pass
you
fail.
might have just had me go with Nick here. I'm not so sure.
Well, you have to have one.
So you were describing it,
So no,
you're describing it correctly, but it's just for a quarter as opposed to a whole year.
In the pass fail, let's talk about it from a college standpoint. When college admissions sees a pass fail, they're going to kind of trigger it being like, what is that? That's what the penalty's for. Let's call it what it is. That is what the penalty's for. When colleges look at this, they're saying pass fail, why doesn't he or she have a grade in this class?
But colleges don't see quarter grades except for seniors in the last 2 quarters of their senior year. So like your transcript only presents final grades, and this doesn't impact that. It's a different process if you wanted to have an alternative grade that would go through SST. Those are explained in other parts of our student handbook. And the idea there being if there were like significant mental health issues, significant physical health issues, there would be alternative grades that would give you a path. And you're absolutely right, when a college looks at a pass-fail, some colleges count that pass as a D- because it's the lowest passing grade. Some colleges don't include it in your GPA anyway. All different colleges have different formulas for recalculating your GPA when it comes to those college admissions.
So I'm a junior. It's the first quarter. I have 7 unexcused absences. I have a B average in the class. You come to me and you say what?
How come you say, well, you gotta get to school more? But then we're gonna say, so because of this policy, your 83 that you had for B is gonna be lowered to a 65, and you're gonna get a P on your report card. When it comes to the end of the year, that's gonna count as a 65 along with the
Okay.
other grades.
All right.
So you
It's
would
not just
still
the-
have-
It's not just the letter, it's you're actually decreasing the work they've done. You're actually saying, okay, here's the work you've done. We're now gonna make your work a
So-
65.
Despite having 7 unexcused absences, you have managed to get 83 on the things that you have accomplished. But because we're saying that we value attendance, we're gonna lower that to a 65, give you a P on your report card. And then when it comes to the end of the year, you could have a 65 instead of an 83 calculated into your final grade.
So with that example, if, first term, whatever happens, they get the P.
Just give me a
Yep.
B.
Terms 2, 3, and 4, they're here, they're on time, they get their B back. So how does that, I mean, I don't know how the broad calculation, so they have say they have 3 terms with a B earned,
Yep.
they're here, and a P because of some sort of issue first term. What does that final grade look like for that student?
It would be 20, the way we're calculating now is 25% for each, so it would be 10, depending on what those are, would be, 85, 85, 85, 65, and your final grade figures out to be like an 80, so a B minus.
So it might not penalize them for the full year, just for that term on their report card, unless it's those last 2 terms of the C.
So the penalty would have been from like a B to a B minus.
What is a student who gets a PPPP for all 4 terms?
So that would be a 65, but
Pass.
we're hoping not to, but that would have been a B, and now it's a D, is basically what it would have been.
But we'd give that kid a pass, but we'd give the other kid sitting next to him was 70 and give him that kid a C minus, who was there the entire time.
No, we weren't planning on doing that we didn't have any language in here about repeating it. This would be something that over time, but that would be something we could look at as far as the policy goes. Some of the policies that we looked at, for instance, Weston does a similar thing where they take the P, but then if you correct your behavior, they remove the P. But if you have two classes or 2 quarters of that, then you lose credit for the entire year, which is one of the things that our policy had previously as well, is credit loss. We kind of got away from credit loss because that's something that is really unrecoverable, and we don't exactly know what it means as far as graduation requirements. If you lost a quarter of your credits in English, for instance, but you passed for the year, you would still not meet graduation requirements because you've only earned 3.75 credits out of 5 that year. So Nick, just to clarify, are you in favor of a more strict penalty, similar to what we had previously, where it would be just a straight failure if you had that many unexcused absences?
Yeah, I mean, I go kind of back and forth on this, and this is why. If a kid is not in school and can get an 83 or an 85, I think we have a bigger problem within the classroom itself. If a kid's not showing up and doesn't care, we're going to be able to say, hey, we can get you a P, just get your pass, and we're just going to throw them through the system. Well, in hindsight, and I know we don't like to use the words, we're just going to get everyone through and graduate. We want to keep our rates up. We want to make sure the state's not coming down on us. We want all these things. But yet, to me, with this policy, we're doing exactly what we hate about the MCAS. We're dumbing it down to get more kids through. If you either pass the class or you fail the class and you get a letter grade with it. That's kind of just how old school mentality I have.
So if you got a failure, you would still fail. I mean, it's just this.
Yes.
And so what we're saying is that essentially that shouldn't be the case. That you shouldn't be able to get an A and miss 10 days out of the first quarter, unexcused, right? But the idea being that we would then penalize that person for missing that time. Before, like I said, without valid excuse, it would just go right to an F. This is a little bit softer than that as far as going to a D, but it still is a penalty for someone who feels that they can miss school kind of with impunity and still get good grades. It does make them rethink that.
And I think just to kind of circle back to one of the conversations we were having earlier about attendance, I think when you go immediately to that failure component, why do they have to come back? They're already failing the class. So we need to get them something to motivate them to come back in, because number one, attendance is a huge issue, as we've all discussed tonight. But I think the hard part that we always have this conversation about, like there's 60 levels of failure for a student, and it's really difficult for them to come back from that failure if they're, depending on what that grade is. And I understand the concept of, old school, and when we were all in school, it was you either failed the class or you got an achieving grade, and I think
We can't really look at it like that.
it's difficult
Yeah.
because, we are having such significant issues with attendance, and we want to make sure the kids are getting here.
But I guess my point is too, though, is if a kid's failing a class, it doesn't matter if he or she's in the room. They're failing the class, right? So what we're looking at is a kid who's passing the class, potentially passing the class, they're not showing up. The bigger thing I'm afraid of is that kid who's busting their butt being there every day is only getting a 70 or 69 or whatever, a D for the class, and the other kid, how are we keeping that kid to be like, hey, why don't I just not show up to school? I can just get a pass rather than get my D plus. A P looks better than a D plus.
So I mean, this is we have these conversations about what a grade means all the time.
Yeah.
instances where a student might get an 83 after missing so many days would be that they're being graded on their mastery. Maybe they can master some of the content in that reduced amount of time, but we still want to encourage them to come to school, whereas a student might need to be there every single day in order to show that type of mastery. And also, most of the grading systems that our teachers have some mechanism to build in that effort, is class participation, other things that are in place. So that is, again, this is all what goes into a grade. Most of the time, it should be academic things as opposed to behavioral things. And this is why it's difficult for us sometimes to implement an academic penalty for a behavioral offense, in this case attendance, but it's one of the only things we do have in order to try to get students to re-engage with school, is the idea.
So what I would say is the kid who's there every day busting his butt and has whatever, the 69 or whatever, you know, this may be overly blunt, but he really can't leave the class and say, I'll just get the D, because he's getting a 69 being there every single day busting his butt. If he's not there, he's going to fail. He's not going to get the grades to pass. That being said, I think we should probably table this and think this through, because I'm not overly comfortable voting yes on this right now with this. So I don't know how other people feel about it. I want to think it through, or maybe take another stab at it.
Well, I agree. I wonder, are there, like you mentioned was it Easton or Weston? Like, are there other policies that maybe we can look at and just get some information?
Yeah, to give you the backstory too, I mean, we did look at all of the TVL handbooks
Okay.
as far as attendance policies are concerned.
Yeah.
Through Principal Jabalike, we collect a lot of data on that as well. The majority of, just sort of off the cuff here, the majority of schools have an attendance loss, a credit loss policy when it comes to attendance, as opposed to grades.
Yeah.
Like I said, the reason why we opted to go to a grade is that it is more easily recoverable, those types of things. So yeah, if you want to give me some data, this went through a pretty lengthy process where we gathered feedback from students, we gathered feedback from staff, we gathered all of the information from other handbooks and tried to take a look at which policies we thought were the best. This one is different than all of the policies. Like, it was a way that we tried to kind of cut a middle road. We did borrow the acknowledged absences from other districts that implemented that policy, but we could certainly provide you with that information if you'd like.
One question I just want to bring up, because something you said earlier. When we look at the requirements for graduation, if they're suffering a credit loss because of these excessive absence, they could be in danger of not meeting the graduation requirements, correct?
Yeah.
Like if they earn, like you said, I think it was 3.75 out of 5 English their senior year.
So they would have to take another English class in order to make up for those
So they
credits.
may not graduate on time. So in that sense, and just playing devil's advocate, if they get a P, they could still graduate, because they would get full credit and they would pass the class versus failing and not. Because I'm trying to think back, like I know when I was in college, and you know, Nick, you triggered my memory with this, like I could only have 3 absences a term because we had trimesters, and if you missed 4 classes, if you had an A, it went to a B. So there was, you know, punishment was you lost a grade in that class. Thankfully, it didn't happen to me because I liked going to school. But is that something you guys have considered, or is that part of any of these policies? Like, you know, because to Nick's point, I get it. If this kid, and honestly speaking, frankly, if you're missing a ton of school and you have a B, you're a wizard. Because I can't even imagine a scenario where you can miss that much time, not get as much work or as much exposure to the work and still get a decent grade. Maybe that's the exception to the rule. But I just think, you know, I mean, I have some issues with this policy as well, because maybe it's just the not understanding it. You know, I don't want to get into, you know, what Nick mentioned is I don't want to compare kid A to kid B, because it's different scenarios. Like, you know, and I'm not going to take a shot at you, Nick, but you know, if this kid's, you know, working his butt off and earning a C or a D, that's a bigger issue to me than the kid that's not showing up and getting a B. And I think that kid not showing up and getting a B probably has more aptitude to get a punishment for not showing up versus this kid probably needs some sort of support in the classroom if he's getting a B and doing, or D, and doing everything he needs to do in that classroom.
Correct, but then what I'm saying is though, is we're putting the resources back to the kid who's not showing up and not the kid who's in the classroom.
So I'm actually sitting here thinking about this, and you know, we've had some emails about, you know, rules changing, and and people not being punished for things that they should be punished for. And I'm sitting here thinking, are we sitting here right now part of the problem? That we're not, if a kid is absent and has unexcused absences, we're like, well, maybe we shouldn't give them a P or F. You know, are we part of the problem right now that there are consequences for your actions, period? If you choose not to go to school and it's unexcused, then you end up with a pass or fail. I mean, are we part of the problem right now that we're like, well, maybe they should get another, you know?
Yes, we are.
Right, so maybe this policy is what it should be.
I think,
Maybe there has to be a consequence.
you know, from an SEL perspective, I actually think one of the words that you use, Mr. Doleman, is recoverable. I think that is where sort of I'm stuck. I'm not stuck necessarily, but that is sort of the word that captures my attention, because I do think from a mental health perspective, from an emotional perspective, there are many kids who are struggling, and if we aren't able to help them see some sort of recoverable option, then we may find ourselves working with children who are really in dire need. So I'm not sure specifically how this is worded, but I do like that concept of helping children recover from absenteeism, but I wonder if there's a way that sort of it can be quantified, maybe, that this isn't meant for every term, that, you know, this is sort of like a, I don't know, I don't have the wording, but I do think that, and Sherry, to your point, I understand that we are giving children sort of some ways out, but I feel like there are, just kind of being part of the high school and having a student in the high school and sort of seeing some of the crises that students are dealing with, I really do want to help students recover from that and not have sort of a reason not to come back, sort of as you said, Jen, that if, you know, if we're not going to be proactive in getting them to be able to recognize that they can recover from something, I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I feel.
No, you are, and why can't we have like what you're saying is, you know, if you have 3 unexcused absences, you have to meet with a mandatory meeting with a guidance counselor to give them some options, you know, something like that, so that you still have, there still is a punishment there, right? Because I know that mental health is, that we have to focus on the SEL of our students, but we also have to focus on our students being good humans and following the laws and the rules, right? And so if we keep bending the rules, oh, well, they didn't mean to, or where do we get? So can we put something in place where they, you know, before they get to that number, there has to be a mandatory meeting with guidance, right? And then that's their, something like that. Because I get what you're saying too, Carolyn.
I think it goes back to, like, what is the portrait of a graduate? You graduate from Norton High. What do you have? What are the skill sets you have? How are you coming out of Norton? And to me, I don't know, like I'm kind of with you, Sherry, like, at some point, like.
I mean, I think once you leave Norton, it's the rules and regulations you're going to face as you go further outside of Norton High School. There's more consequences for actions, whether it's losing a grade in college. I mean, if you know, we said it's what, day 37 of school?
Yes.
If I work full-time and I've missed 15 days of work, I can pretty much tell you my boss is gonna have a conversation with me, and that conversation might be, reflect your unemployment.
But if you're in sales and you're busting button making money, you don't have to work 8 hours a day. You could work 4. You might be out working everyone else in 12.
Right, but you're doing your job.
Correct,
Yes,
correct.
you're meeting
But so is this kid who has a B.
I also
Mr.
think,
Chair.
So just along those lines, I mean, what you said kind of encapsulates what was another part of this initially, was the idea of students in good standing and having additional privileges. And that was looking for alternative ways to try to encourage attendance and things like parking privileges, things like participation in after-school activities, those types of things that could also be part of being a good student, is showing up every day to that. And that's one of the reasons why we were kind of reconceptualizing that. We do have built into that, and I apologize, it's not in what you're looking at before you, but we have in our attendance improvement plans as also part of this, where it would be that meeting with the staff, guidance counselor, our assistant principal, and the parent. Again, some of the issues that we run into there is parent attendance, and oftentimes students who are the most absent are going to be the hardest to get a parent to attend a meeting. And so it becomes a difficult sort of issue to bridge there as well. So it's something that is part of the policy, is to be more proactive rather than say, at the end of the term, we'll look back and say, you missed this many days, come and have an appeal. Once you reach this threshold, we're going to reach out to you and have a meeting in order to try to establish an improvement plan.
And that threshold also aligns with the attendance policy that you just approved a short while ago in terms of the 5 days. So once a student gets to that 5-day, that's when the principal or their designee needs to step in and reach out to the family and meet with them.
Right, so, Mr. Chair, recognizing that I think we're not where we need to be on that last part, however, knowing that the rest of it, the excuse, the acknowledge, et cetera, should get passed sooner rather than later because we're already well into the school year, would you entertain a motion to approve the policy, the addition to the handbook, but strike the last part?
The highlighted part that we're discussing?
Yeah, the unexcused absences equals a pass, fail, et cetera. The part that we all have a problem with.
Are we to revisit that?
Yeah,
Or-
well, but they can come back with another try at it, and we can always say, yeah, we'll add that at a later date. But at this point, it seems to me like this may be something where we're not comfortable enough to pass it as written. And I think that the absences part is by and large what we want to do. It's just the one section, the one paragraph on a line that we're not really comfortable with. So I think we should probably strike that and vote on passing the rest of it as written. And then the administration can come back to us with some ideas and thoughts, and we can take another shot at it another day and add it to the handbook at that point.
So there is, just to clarify, there is already an academic penalty part of this? That is so.
Yep, we're not rescinding the old one,
Okay.
because we have to have something in place.
But this,
But that one is
the only issue is that this is kind of changing the process.
I hear you,
Okay.
I hear you. So my guess is that we're gonna vote this down,
Okay.
so that's probably gonna come back anyways. So you're kind of stopped out there at this point, if you know what I mean. Like that's your best case scenario, I think, right now, quite honestly.
Mr. Chair, if you
Yeah.
don't mind. Ethan, you had mentioned that you had a committee that went through this, pretty comprehensive process in order to get to this highlighted piece. Do you have all of that information from that group that could be shared with the committee and perhaps seeing what the other policies are that were considered and the research that you guys did and the feedback that you got from staff and from students might help them kind of figure out what the next step may be?
Yeah, I'd be glad to provide that. I guess I'm just looking for some guidance from the committee too, is that we're in favor of a stiffer penalty, is what I'm understanding, that this is too lenient.
I don't know. I don't know that I'm looking for a stricter penalty. I don't know. I don't even know that I can articulate what I really want
Well,
anymore at this point.
Let's strike it then, and we can talk about it. I mean, it's,
Ms. Picasso, yes.
This is a little bit off topic, but if I can clarify what I think you're thinking.
That'd be great.
Someone tell us.
By all means.
I have a real problem with connecting grades to behavior. Grades should be a measure of how much of the curriculum the student has learned, how much they've mastered. I think missing school, there should be a consequence for that. But you're right, Dan, there are some wizards out there who can miss a lot of school. And when they come, they can do the work. They can get A's on the test. So there's part of me that says we should lower their grade. Like if a student does graffiti, we don't lower their grade. If a student throws food in the lunchroom, we don't lower their grade. There's other consequences. And I think, are some of you feeling uncomfortable with changing their grade based on a behavior? I mean, and I get what Mr. Dahlman's saying. You don't suspend somebody for skipping school. That's, but in my mind, we're meshing two things that shouldn't be meshed. And I think that's why he's putting in the recoverable bit. We don't have any other stick. This is our stick. we're gonna give you the pass-fail, but we've got a carrot to try to get you into the path. We've got to do something to get them to come to school. You know, there's very few other consequences. If you guys can think of some other consequences.
I'm not sure this achieves that, to be honest with you.
So I
don't see
think
how this
that's, but I
achieves
think
getting
that's
back
exactly what I'm thinking, though.
I knew I was
In-
gonna say what you were thinking.
Thank you for your help tonight. I think that in this policy, I'm looking for, okay, you know, if you have 5 unexcused absences, this could happen, but at unexcused absence 3, these are the steps that we're gonna take to not get you to 5. And that's kind of what you're saying, Carolyn, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yes.
So that is in the handbook language that's not there. Like,
Here.
so this was the memo that had highlighted what I thought were the most critical changes. But there is an attendance improvement plan portion of the handbook that I can read a little bit from it. In response to student absenteeism, NHS will implement a tiered system of interventions and supports. Whenever possible, we work to identify barriers to regular attendance, conduct outreach to student and family, offer services that are responsive to the student's individual challenges to increase attendance. Attendance improvement plans may include options for attendance buyback, recommendations for school-based interventions to promote consistent attendance, referral to community services, and/or loss of privileges such as driving, parking on campus, participation in extracurricular activities, including athletics. And then it has kind of what you're describing is 5 or more acknowledged absences or truancies would lead to an attendance improvement plan, referral to NHS attendance team, and application of academic penalties is sort of what we have here. So it would be.
So I wonder if that was changed to at unexcused absence 3. Because if this is saying 5 or more, we need to kind of have that a little bit before the 5, right?
I think unexcused absence 3, the warning letter goes out if I remember
Is that-
mistaken
did I say
from
that?
earlier. That's what.
I'm wondering, Ethan,
Yes.
if you take that information and put it together with this,
So
if that's
in the
our-
handbook it is, and this is my
It's just a separate.
misjudgment of thinking what would be the
Yeah.
most important thing to sort of look at here was the table and sort of the adding of that category and keeping an academic penalty for this. So if you'd like, I can definitely provide more information about sort of what this looks holistically as far as part of the, I mean, granted, you're kind of seeing just part of it here. You're seeing the table that kind of expresses this idea, and you're seeing the academic penalty, but maybe you're not seeing the sort of whole of the attendance section.
Right.
So I can certainly provide the entire thing to you as far as what that looks like, and we can continue to take a look.
If you could
at that.
provide the entire section that sort of includes the wording as you would potentially have it in the handbook.
right.
I'm comfortable voting the other policies with that excluded,
And going back to that,
to come back to that.
yeah.
Okay, so there's a motion to exclude the highlighted portion, which is the 5 excused absences acknowledged, so on and so forth, with the pass-fail, but have the rest of the policy
Voted on?
be voted on. Yes.
Yes.
So,
Second,
Can I just get a point of clarification?
yes.
If we shoot this down and then it comes back, when does term 1 end?
2 weeks, basically. So I mean, that's
So would that
part.
matter?
I mean, we've done attendance improvement plans with everybody, but we wouldn't implement. I mean, I don't think it would be fair to implement the old penalty at this point, since it hasn't been something that we've talked about very much. We've been really trying to focus on getting students to school. So I'd have to talk with Mrs. Benner as far as she's the one who drives the bus mostly on sort of attendance-related issues. I can talk with her about those things and how we would handle that.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
there's a motion and a second, so all those in favor of this policy with the highlighted portion struck from the overall student attendance policy?
Aye.
5-0. All right, so Mr. Dolman, at this point, please send us the unexcused absence data you have, and then what we might look to do is add another portion to this policy at a later meeting based on discussions and things like that.
Ethan and I will meet tomorrow and put things together for you.
I mean, speaking frankly, there needs to be penalties. I'm very much in favor of that. I'm not a huge fan of the pass-fail. I would like to see it kind of more of that progressive. If you're a wizard earning a B and you're here for 2 days, then maybe it starts going down. That's just my personal opinion. take it for what it's worth, which is not much.
Just to be clear, Ethan, I mean, there's been a lot of discussion on high school stuff tonight, so I want to just say, I certainly appreciate all the work that went into this, and I hope this isn't being taken as, you know, we're coming at you or anything.
Well, no, I mean, we're trying to put our heads together to solve the problem, and
Yeah,
you know,
I just
make
want to be
solutions,
clear. We appreciate all the work that went into it, and reading this time, as opposed to the first time, I was much happier with how this was spelled out, so thank you for all the work on that.
Sure, I've mostly done, yeah, but this is better, I'll get the most of the credit for that.
Yeah.
And I would, yeah, I'll leave it at that. We'll put together whatever information you need in order to do it, if I can make it more
And I think
clear.
the other thing that might be helpful too is to include the whole handbook as well, so you can see where that highlighted component
Yes.
falls in place with the attendance action plans for individual students as well.
Yeah, that would be really helpful.
Maybe perhaps seeing it in the context
Yes.
with that other documentation might help you feel better about it.
Should we maybe just direct any issues with that to the chair, and then let the chair kind of...
Well, let's let the principals results of their meeting tomorrow, and then maybe we'll take the next step too. If we basically have them come to us with something and then address our concerns with a little more clarity, I think that works.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other business to come before us? Okay. Entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you guys.